The first thing that broke was the light. It did not shatter or flicker as human-made lamps sometimes did when their filaments failed or their circuits overheated. It thinned. The color temperature slid toward a brittle white, then toward something that could not decide whether it wanted to be blue or dead. Along the hull of the survey vessel Peregrine Wake, shadows lengthened in directions that made no sense, pooling beneath conduits and handrails as if gravity itself had shifted allegiance. The crew noticed, not because alarms sounded, but because humans had learned long ago to distrust quiet changes. Marilyn So did not look up right away. Her hands were inside an open access panel, fingers tracing the edges of a diagnostic lattice she had rebuilt 3 times already during the long crossing. She felt the light change on the back of her neck before she saw it, a faint cooling prickle that raised the fine hairs along her arms. She paused, listening to the ship through the soles of her boots. The Peregrine Wake had a particular hum when everything was healthy, a layered sound like breath over distant surf. Now there was a hitch in it, a hesitation between cycles. She withdrew her hands and sealed the panel with a practiced motion, standing slowly so as not to spook the moment. Across the engineering bay, Vashran Quill had stopped mid-sentence, mouth open as if holding a thought between teeth. He was looking at the far bulkhead where a line of status lights had dimmed to the same indecisive pallor. "That is new," he said, finally finishing the sentence he had abandoned. His voice carried the faint rasp of someone who had grown up in low-humidity habitats, consonants catching slightly as if they needed more air than they were given. Marilyn nodded once. "That is very new." The ship shuddered then, not a violent jolt, but a subtle wrongness, as if the deck had briefly forgotten where down was supposed to be. Tools rattled in their cradles. Somewhere forward, a door cycled open and closed again without being asked. The hum of the engines stuttered and resumed, off by a fraction that only someone who had lived inside that sound for years would notice. "Bridge is going to call," Vashran said. "They will," Marilyn agreed. She was already moving, boots striking the deck with a measured urgency. "And I am going to tell them we just tripped something that does not exist on any of the maps we were given." The call came before they reached the lift, the voice of Captain Sorinal Vow steady but edged with a tension that did not belong to routine anomalies. "Engineering, report. We are experiencing a localized degradation in light output across multiple spectrums," Marilyn said, keeping her tone even. "Power distribution is stable, but something external is interfering with photon behavior. The engines also reported a momentary loss of inertial coherence." There was a pause on the line. When the captain spoke again, it was after someone else had said something in the background, a whisper too soft to resolve. "Say that again, slower." Marilyn did. She added, "We did not hit anything. Sensors did not register debris or radiation spikes consistent with known hazards. Whatever this is, it is not throwing off the usual signatures." Another pause. "Understood," the captain said. "All departments are reporting similar inconsistencies. Navigation is seeing drift that does not correspond to any vector we are applying. We are holding position as best we can. Engineering, I want eyes on the core and the field projectors. If this is some kind of spatial shear, I want to know before it decides to tear us in half." The line cut. Marilyn exhaled through her nose, a habit she had picked up from a grandmother who had believed breath could be counted like coins. "All right," she said to Vashran. "You take the projectors. I am going to the core. If you see anything that looks like it wants to rewrite physics, do not touch it." Vashran smiled thinly. "As opposed to the things that politely ask, those you can negotiate with," Marilyn said, already stepping into the lift. The descent was smooth, but the light continued to thin, the walls taking on a sterile sheen that reminded Marilyn of old photographs from the first off-world habitats. She remembered stories of pioneers who had described alien skies in terms of what they were not, because language had lagged behind experience. Blue that was not blue, darkness that was not dark. She had thought those accounts poetic exaggeration. Now she wondered how much had been simple honesty. The core chamber was a cathedral of controlled violence, containment fields arcing in disciplined curves around a heart that burned without flame. Today, the arcs wavered, not enough to trigger failsafes, but enough to make Marilyn's jaw tighten. She circled the chamber, eyes flicking from readout to readout, mind building and discarding models as fast as she could assemble them. "Come on," she murmured, not to the machinery but to herself. "Show me what you are." The answer came from outside, not a sound exactly, more a pressure, a sense of attention sliding along the hull like a hand testing the grain of wood. The instruments reacted a fraction of a second later, graphs spiking and flattening, numbers scrolling too fast to parse. The containment arcs brightened, then dimmed, as if something had briefly interposed itself between the core and the fields that shaped it. Marilyn felt a flare of anger cut through the fear. "No," she said aloud, "you do not get to do that." She keyed the intercom, routing to the bridge. "Captain, something is actively probing the ship, not passive interference. We are being examined." The response was immediate. "Confirmed," Captain Vau said. "We have visual." Marilyn froze. "Visual on what?" The captain did not answer right away. When she did, her voice was quieter. "On a structure. It was not there before. It is there now." The main display on the bridge filled with a shape that refused easy description. It was vast, larger than the Peregrine Wake by orders of magnitude, but its edges were not crisp. They folded and unfolded in slow, deliberate motions, like a thought considering itself. There were no lights, no obvious ports or weapons, no symmetry that human eyes could latch onto for comfort. It occupied space the way a concept did, undeniable once perceived, impossible to ignore. Around the bridge, the crew stood or sat in stillness, each person confronting the same private recalibration. Humans had encountered alien life before. They had exchanged signals, traded samples, even shared cautious moments of mutual curiosity with species whose biologies and psychologies diverged wildly from their own. But this was different. This was not a ship in any sense humans recognized. This was not a being in any category they had named. "Scale estimate?" the captain asked. Navigation answered, voice tight. "Uncertain. Sensors disagree depending on wavelength. It is both larger and smaller than our maximum range suggests." "Is it moving?" "Yes, no, it is adjusting relative to us without crossing space as we understand it." Captain Vau closed her eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them. "Communications." The communications officer swallowed. "No signals detected. We are broadcasting standard first contact packets across all bands. No response." On the engineering level, Marilyn felt the pressure increase, a gentle but insistent push against the core fields. It was not forceful, not yet. It reminded her of a curious animal pressing its nose against a barrier, testing for weakness. She opened a channel to Vashran. "Status? Projectors are holding," he said, "but the field harmonics are being mirrored. Whatever this is, it can read our configurations as fast as we set them." "That is not good." "No," Vashran agreed. "It is very impressive, though. Focus." "I am focused." "I am also terrified." Marilyn allowed herself a brief smile. "Good, that means you are paying attention." On the bridge, Captain Vau straightened. "All hands," she said, her voice carrying through the ship. "We are encountering an unknown entity. We are not under attack. We are not firing weapons. Maintain stations and await orders." A murmur rippled, then settled. Humans were good at this, at holding themselves together in the face of the incomprehensible. It was a skill honed over centuries of storms, plagues, and the slow realization that the universe did not owe them comfort. The entity moved again. This time, the movement translated into a visible change. A portion of the structure folded inward, revealing a cavity where light bent sharply, refracting into impossible angles. Within that cavity, something like a pattern emerged, a shifting lattice of points that pulsed in sequence. "Captain," communications said, "I am detecting modulation. Not in any band we broadcast, but there is structure. It might be intentional." Can you decode it? No. But I can attempt to mirror it. Captain Val considered for a fraction of a second. Do it, slowly. The lattice pulsed again. Communications matched the rhythm, feeding it back through a series of adaptive emitters. The ship vibrated as power rerouted, systems bending to accommodate an act that had never been part of their design parameters. In engineering, Marilyn felt the pressure ease. The core stabilized, arcs settling into their proper curves. She let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Captain," she said, "whatever you just did, it worked. The probing has lessened." "Good," the captain replied. "Stand by." Minutes passed. The lattice shifted, its pulses changing in frequency and pattern. Communications chased it, a dance of call and response that felt less like language and more like alignment. The light on the bridge began to normalize, color temperature warming back toward familiar tones. Then the entity did something unexpected. It contracted. Not retreating, not withdrawing, but focusing, drawing its vastness inward until a portion of it approximated the size of the peregrine wake. The rest did not vanish. It simply became less relevant, like a background thought set aside. Within the contracted portion, a shape resolved. Still alien, still resistant to easy categorization, but closer now to something the human mind could hold without slipping. The lattice condensed into a surface, patterns stabilizing into repeating motifs that hinted at purpose. "Captain," navigation whispered, "it is matching our scale." Captain Val nodded once. "It wants to be seen." Marilyn left the core chamber, heading back toward the bridge as fast as she dared. Her mind raced, not with fear now, but with a fierce, almost defiant curiosity. She had chosen a life among the stars because she wanted to know what lay beyond the edges of maps. Now something from beyond those edges had chosen to know them in return. When she arrived, breath slightly quickened, the bridge was hushed. The entity hung on the display, its newly focused form rotating slowly, as if presenting itself for inspection. Communications spoke softly. "The modulation has changed. It is simpler now, repetitive." "Meaning?" the captain asked. "Meaning it might be an identifier or a greeting." Captain Val straightened her shoulders. "Then we answer." She turned, looking at the crew, at the humans who had built a fragile vessel and hurled it into the dark with nothing but stubbornness and math to protect them. "We did not come out here to hide," she said. "We did not come out here to conquer. We came to see. Let us be seen." Communications sent the response, a carefully constructed sequence drawn from the deepest layers of human first contact theory, stripped of assumptions, heavy with intent. It carried math, yes, and physics, but also something harder to quantify. A record of human reach, of hands that built and rebuilt, of voices that argued and sang and soothed children to sleep under unfamiliar skies. It was not a song, it was a statement of existence. The entity responded almost immediately. This time there was no doubt. A presence flooded the ship, not overwhelming but pervasive, touching each mind like a question posed without words. Images surfaced unbidden, not as hallucinations, but as shared reference points. A planet wrapped in storm, life clinging to narrow margins. Structures grown rather than built, spanning distances humans measured in light. A long watch kept over regions of space humans had only just begun to traverse. Marilyn sank into a chair, heart pounding. She felt no malice in the contact, no hunger. There was curiosity, yes, and something else. Assessment. Captain Val's voice cut through the shared moment, steady as ever. "We are human," she said, speaking aloud as if that mattered, as if the sound itself carried weight. "We are explorers, we build, we adapt, we make mistakes and we fix them. We do not know what you are, but we would like to learn." The presence lingered, then shifted. The images changed. Now there was comparison. Human vessels mapped against alien constructs. Human timelines set beside others that stretched deeper into the past. There was no judgment in it, but there was clarity. The message that followed was not a sentence. It was a conclusion. These humans were small. These humans were new. These humans were not insignificant. The pressure withdrew. leaving the bridge suddenly quiet. The entity's focused form held for a moment longer, then expanded again, unfolding back into its vast, indefinable totality. Space returned to its expected behavior, stars resuming their distant, indifferent glitter. "Captain," navigation said softly, "it is leaving." Captain Val watched the display until the last trace vanished. Then she let herself exhale. "Log everything," she said. "Every sensor reading, every subjective report. This changes our charts." "Yes, Captain," the crew replied, voices overlapping, energized and shaken. Marilyn stood, legs unsteady, and made her way back to engineering. The ship felt different now, not damaged, not altered in any measurable way, but marked, as if it had been measured and found interesting. She placed a hand on the warm casing of the core, feeling its steady pulse. "You behaved," she told it quietly. The peregrine wake resumed its course, engines humming their familiar songless rhythm. Behind it, the vastness closed, indifferent once more. But somewhere, something ancient had taken note of a small human vessel and the stubborn species that had built it. That, Marilyn thought, was going to matter. The stars looked the same afterward, which unsettled people more than if they had changed. In the days following the encounter, the peregrine wake moved through familiar corridors of mapped space, its trajectory unaltered, its systems nominal. Light behaved itself. Gravity obeyed. Radiation levels stayed politely within margins humans had learned to trust. And yet the crew moved, as if the deck might tilt without warning, as if space itself had developed a personality and might decide to speak again at any moment. Captain Sorinal Vow ordered extended rotations off duty, not because fatigue indicators demanded it, but because she understood people. Humans processed the extraordinary poorly when denied time to sit with it. She wanted arguments in the mess, not mistakes on the bridge. The mess filled quickly on the first such rotation, voices overlapping in a way that felt almost nostalgic. Cups were held too tightly. Food went half-eaten. People talked around what they meant, circling the encounter without landing on it, as if naming it too directly might summon it back. "It matched us," said Arjun Bale, one of the navigators, his fingers tracing idle patterns on the table's surface. "Not exactly, but enough. That was deliberate." "Everything about it was deliberate," replied Senka Morado from Xenobiology. "The scale shift, the modulation, the withdrawal, it was controlled curiosity." Vashran Quill snorted softly. "Controlled curiosity from something that could probably fold our ship into a geometric suggestion." "That does not make it hostile," Senka said. "It does not make it friendly either." Marilyn so listened, nursing a cup that had gone cold. She had replayed the engineering logs so many times that the numbers blurred when she closed her eyes. There were gaps in them. Not missing data exactly, but places where the instruments had clearly reported something and human math had failed to describe it. She found those gaps more troubling than any spike or alarm. "It treated us like a sample," she said finally. The table quieted. "Not an enemy, not a peer, a data point." Captain Vow, seated slightly apart, inclined her head. "Agreed. The question is whether that was a first and last measurement or the beginning of a series." No one liked that thought. Humans understood series. They implied trends. After the mess dispersed, Marilyn returned to engineering with a sense of unfinished business that sleep could not touch. She pulled up the core interaction logs again, isolating the moments of pressure, the subtle distortions that had brushed against containment without breaching it. There was a pattern there, she was sure of it, not in the numbers themselves, but in their timing. The probing had not been random, it had been responsive. "You were learning us," she murmured to the empty bay, "but we were learning you too." She overlaid the ship's adaptive responses with the external modulation detected by communications. The correlation was imperfect, but it was there, a kind of call and answer that reminded her of old mechanical looms, threads crossing and recrossing to produce something stronger than any single strand. A soft chime announced company. Vashran stepped in, hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket, eyes already scanning the displays. You look like someone who found a secret and does not like what it implies. I found a conversation, Marilyn said, one we did not realize we were having. She shared the overlay. Vashran leaned closer, brow furrowing. It adjusted when we adjusted, faster than reaction time. That means predictive modeling, or direct perception. That is worse. Yes, they stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the ship filling the space. Finally, Vashran straightened. Captain needs to see this. Captain Vow did not interrupt as Marilyn explained, did not ask questions until the end. When she did speak, it was measured. If it can model us that quickly, then any future encounter will not be a blank slate. No, Marilyn said, we will be known quantities, which means, the captain said, that how we behaved matters. The implications rippled outward, touching everything from defense planning to diplomacy. Humans had always assumed first contact as a singular event, a moment of introduction. Now it seemed more like an opening move in a long game whose rules they did not yet understand. 2 days later, the long-range array detected an anomaly. This one announced itself differently. There was no thinning of light, no pressure against the hull. Instead, there was absence. A region of space ahead where sensor returns fell to near zero, not because there was nothing there, but because whatever was there did not reflect, emit, or interact in expected ways. Navigation flagged it immediately. Captain, we have a void region approximately 3 light hours across. It is not on any charts. Captain Vow leaned forward. Relative position, directly along our planned route. The bridge went quiet again, but this time the silence was sharper, edged with recognition. Humans were good at pattern recognition. It was one of their strengths and one of their flaws. Marilyn felt it too, a tightening in her chest. It could be related, she said, a secondary structure or a wake, or a test, Vashran added. Captain Vow considered. Options. We can alter course, navigation said, add several weeks to the journey. We can approach cautiously, Senka said, gather data from the periphery. We can pass through, Vashran said, his tone neutral, assuming passage is possible. The captain looked at the display, at the blankness where stars should have been. If we divert, she said slowly, we learn very little. If we approach or pass through, we learn something, possibly at great cost. No one argued. Exploration had never been safe. Humans had just gotten better at pretending otherwise. Approach, the captain decided. Slow, maximum sensor coverage. Engineering, I want you ready to isolate any system the moment it behaves strangely. Yes, Captain, Marilyn said, already moving. As the peregrine wake drew closer, the void region resolved into something stranger still. It was not empty, it was structured. Layers within layers, nested fields that bent sensor returns inward, trapping them in loops that never quite closed. It reminded Marilyn of the lattice the entity had shown them, but distorted, stretched thin. This is not natural, Senka said, voice hushed. At least not by any definition we use. No, Marilyn agreed. This is engineered or grown or curated. The ship crossed the threshold. For a moment, nothing happened. Then everything happened at once. The stars vanished. Not occluded, not dimmed, but gone, replaced by a uniform gray that had no depth cues. The hum of the engines deepened, vibrating through bone. Gravity fluctuated, lightening and heavying in slow waves that made stomachs lurch. Hold course, Captain Vow said, gripping the arms of her chair. Report. Navigation is compromised, came the reply. We have no external reference points. Engineering, the captain asked. Marilyn swallowed. Core output is stable, but the containment fields are experiencing harmonic interference. Similar to the encounter, but more diffuse. The presence returned, not as sharply as before, not focused on any one system, but as an encompassing awareness that pressed gently against the crew's minds. Images surfaced again, but these were different. Where before there had been comparison, now there was context. Vast regions of space threaded with structures like this void, each serving as a boundary, a marker, a filter, understanding dawned, cold and clear. This is a checkpoint, Marilyn said softly, a kind of gate. A gate to what? The captain asked. The answer came not as images this time, but as a sensation, distance measured not in space, but in capability. Beyond the gate lay regions humans could reach physically, but not conceptually, domains shaped by assumptions humans did not yet share. They are partitioning the universe, Vashran said, not politically, cognitively. The ship shuddered as the void responded, fields tightening around the hull, probing again, but with more focus. Systems flickered, then stabilized as adaptive routines kicked in. The Peregrine Wake was learning even as it was being tested. Captain, communications said, awe and fear mingling. There is modulation. It is similar to before but more complex. Captain Val met Marilyn's eyes across the bridge. Can we answer? Marilyn thought of the overlays, the patterns she had seen. Yes, she said, but not the same way. This is not a greeting. This is an evaluation. Then what do we send? The captain asked. Marilyn closed her eyes for a heartbeat. We send what we are best at, she said. Adaptation. We let the ship respond. We show them that when pressed, we do not break. We change. Captain Val nodded. Do it. Engineering and communications worked in tandem, loosening rigid protocols, allowing systems to reconfigure dynamically, not toward efficiency or safety alone, but toward coherence with the surrounding fields. It went against decades of design philosophy. It felt like letting go of the wheel at speed. The void reacted. Pressure increased, then eased, then increased again, a push and pull that echoed the give and take of learning. The gray outside the hull shifted, deepening, resolving into layers that hinted at vastness beyond. Minutes stretched, sweat beaded, teeth clenched. Then, abruptly, the pressure vanished. Stars snapped back into existence, sharper than before, as if freshly minted. The ship surged forward, inertia catching up all at once, and then they were through, leaving the void region behind them. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then navigation laughed, a shaky, disbelieving sound. We are through, he said, and our instruments, Captain, our charts have updated. Captain Val leaned forward. Updated how? There are regions marked now, he said. Not with coordinates, but with probability gradients, as if the ship now understands where we can go safely and where we cannot. Yet, Marilyn felt a strange, fierce pride. It learned, she said. We learned. Captain Val straightened, a slow smile touching her lips. Then we have just been admitted, she said. Not welcomed, not invited, but acknowledged. The Peregrine Wake continued on, carrying humans deeper into a universe that was no longer merely empty or hostile, but structured by minds older and broader than their own. And somewhere beyond the stars, something vast adjusted its models, accounting for a species that did not remain what it was when measured. That, too, was going to matter. Acknowledgement changed the crew more than danger ever had. Before, every unknown had carried the same blunt weight, a hazard to be mapped, avoided, or endured. Now unknowns had intent layered into them. Space was no longer merely indifferent, it was curated. That realization settled into the Peregrine Wake like a second atmosphere, invisible but ever-present, altering how people breathed. The updated charts became a quiet obsession. Navigation ran simulations continuously, projecting potential routes that threaded probability gradients like needles through fabric. Some paths glowed with high confidence, corridors where the ship's newly adapted systems predicted minimal resistance. Others faded into ambiguity, zones where outcomes branched wildly, futures stacked atop one another like unstable scaffolding. Captain Sorinal Vow studied those projections late into her cycles, long after duty rotations ended. She did not do so out of fear. Fear was familiar, manageable. What troubled her was responsibility. If humans were now visible to something that partitioned reality itself, then every choice carried weight far beyond a single hull. Marilyn so felt that weight most keenly in engineering. The ship had changed. Not structurally, not in any way that would satisfy a certification authority, but subtly, pervasively. Systems that once followed rigid hierarchies now behaved more like ecologies. Power flows redistributed themselves preemptively. Field projectors adjusted harmonics before interference fully manifested. It was as if the peregrine wake had learned to anticipate pressure, to lean into it rather than resist. She did not entirely trust this newfound grace. Adaptive behavior is accelerating, she told Vashran as they stood before a lattice of shifting readouts. We are within acceptable margins, but the rate of change is enthusiastic. Vashran tilted his head, watching a graph that refused to settle. The ship is doing what we told it to do. We gave it permission to learn in unfamiliar contexts. Yes, Marilyn said. We did not specify when to stop. That might be the point, Vashran replied. Static things do not pass gates. She rubbed her temples. Dynamic things sometimes dissolve, only if they lack cohesion. Marilyn looked at him sharply. And you are confident we have enough? Vashran considered. Ask me after the next anomaly. They did not have to wait long. 3 days beyond the void gate, sensors began to register distant disturbances. Not singular events, but patterns of absence and presence interleaved, like scars across spacetime. These were not gates. They lacked the layered intentionality of the void region. Instead, they looked like the aftermath of immense stress, regions where reality had been bent and had not entirely sprung back. Senka Morado was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. These look like conflict zones. Captain Val folded her hands. Between whom? That, Senka said quietly, is the wrong question. The ship approached cautiously, maintaining distance while deploying long-range probes. Data streamed back in fragments, corrupted by lingering distortions. What could be reconstructed suggested energies far beyond human weaponry, but not indiscriminate. Impacts followed trajectories. Forces had been applied with purpose. This was a battle, Vashran said, or something very much like one. Marilyn felt a chill. Between entities capable of shaping space at this scale. Yes, and we were just acknowledged by one of them, she added. Silence followed. Humans understood escalation. They had written entire histories in its ink. Captain Val broke the quiet. We log this, we observe, we do not interfere. Acknowledged, the bridge replied in unison. They did not intend to interfere. The universe, it seemed, had other plans. The first signal came as a ripple across the probability gradients, a sudden skew that navigation flagged with rising alarm. One of the ambiguous zones ahead collapsed into near certainty, not safety, but encounter. Captain, navigation said, something is approaching along a path that did not exist moments ago. The display filled with a shape that was immediately, viscerally different from the first entity they had encountered. Where that presence had been vast and controlled, this one was jagged, asymmetrical, its boundaries fraying as if under constant strain. It moved with speed that bordered on violence, tearing through local spacetime rather than gliding across it. That is not a gatekeeper, Vashran muttered. No, Marilyn agreed. That is something in pain. The presence hit them like a wave. Systems screamed as distortions spiked. The ship lurched, alarms flaring before adaptive routines dragged parameters back from the brink. Crew members cried out, not from physical injury, but from the sudden intrusion into their minds. Images flooded in, chaotic and fragmented, vast structures collapsing, fields unraveling, pressure without release. A relentless pursuit across domains humans could barely comprehend. This is not probing, Senka gasped. This is distress. Captain Val gripped her chair. Can it perceive us? The answer came unbidden, a spike of attention that felt like a scream catching on a throat. The presence latched onto the peregrine wake with desperate intensity, not examining, not evaluating, but clinging. Marilyn staggered, bracing herself against a console. It is using us, she said, as cover or as reference. It knows we passed a gate it could not. Vashran's eyes widened. It is trying to follow our path. Captain, communications said, voice strained. There is modulation, but it is unstable. I cannot mirror it. It is not coherent enough. Captain Val made a decision that would echo far beyond the moment. We cannot outrun it, she said, and if we lead it back through the gate, we may be violating whatever trust we have been granted. Then what do we do? Navigation asked. Marilyn swallowed hard. We teach it. Every eye turned to her. She forced herself to continue. It is trapped in a mode of interaction defined by force. The gate responded to us because we adapted. This thing cannot. It is tearing itself apart trying. If we can stabilize its perception, even briefly, we might be able to show it a path that does not destroy it. That assumes it wants one, Vashran said. It wants relief, Senka countered. That much is clear. Captain Val weighed the risks with brutal speed. Engineering, she said. Can you interface without letting it overwrite us? Marilyn thought of the ship's newfound cohesion, of systems that leaned instead of resisted. Yes, she said, but it will be intimate. Do it, the captain said. We are not a weapon, we are not prey, we are a third option. Engineering and communications fused their efforts, creating a controlled channel not of data, but of state. They allowed the ship's adaptive patterns to be visible, broadcasting not instructions, but examples, stability under stress, flexibility without collapse, boundaries that moved without breaking. The presence convulsed as it made contact. Pressure spiked, then wavered. The jagged edges of its form smoothed fractionally, not healing, but redistributing strain. Images sharpened. The chaos resolved into context. The presence was fleeing something akin to the gatekeeper entity, but altered, fractured along ideological lines humans could barely infer. Where one partitioned, another enforced. Where one curated, another constrained. This is a schism, Senka whispered. A civil war of sorts. The presence clung harder, fear radiating like heat. It was not evil. It was losing. Marilyn felt tears sting her eyes, unbidden. We cannot save it, she said softly. We are too small. No, Captain Val said, but we can choose what we are. She opened a ship-wide channel. All hands, she said. We are about to take an action that may place us in danger. We are doing it because it is consistent with who we are. Those who wish to object may do so now. No one spoke. Very well, the captain said. Proceed. Marilyn adjusted the broadcast, narrowing it, refining it, offering the presence a scaffold rather than a crutch. The peregrine wake did not shield it. It showed it how to shield itself, how to distribute stress across dimensions rather than letting it tear through one. The presence responded, halting its headlong rush. Its form stabilized further, coherence increasing by degrees that felt miraculous. The pressure eased, replaced by a tentative equilibrium, then something else noticed. The probability gradients ahead twisted sharply, collapsing into a single, dire trajectory. Another vast awareness pressed in, colder, more rigid. This one did not scream, it judged. Captain Val felt it like a verdict. We have been seen, she said. The new presence did not probe gently, it asserted. Fields locked, space constricted. The peregrine wake groaned as if caught in a vice. Marilyn's hands flew across controls. It is trying to isolate us, she said. And the other. The distressed presence recoiled, fear surging. It tried to flee, but its path folded back on itself, blocked. Captain Val did not hesitate. We break contact, she said. Now, that will sever the stabilization, Marilyn said. It may not survive. The captain's jaw tightened. And if we stay, neither might we. A choice, sharp and immediate. Marilyn made it. She rerouted power not to engines, but to the adaptive core routines, pushing them beyond tested limits. We are not severing, she said. We are sharing. The ship's state broadcast widened, enveloping the distressed presence fully, blurring the boundary between hull and other. For a moment, the peregrine wake was not alone. Its cohesion extended, fragile but real. The enforcing presence reacted instantly. Pressure intensified, space screaming under constraint. But now it encountered something unexpected. Resistance that did not oppose directly, but flowed around the force, redistributing it in ways that undermined its certainty. This is new to it, Vashran gasped. It does not know how to categorize us. That buys time, Captain Val said, time enough. The distressed presence seized the moment, restructuring itself along the patterns it had been shown. Not perfectly, not completely. But enough to slip sideways, not fleeing through space, but through possibility. It vanished. The enforcing presence lingered for a heartbeat longer, pressing, analyzing. Then it withdrew, not defeated, but thwarted, its models unsettled. Stars returned. The ship sagged, systems groaning as they reasserted familiar hierarchies. Alarms died down one by one. On the bridge, people breathed again. Marilyn sank to the deck, exhaustion crashing over her. Vashran crouched beside her, gripping her shoulder. "You did it," he said, awe threading his voice. "No," she replied faintly. "We did." Captain Vow stood, looking at the space where the presence had been. "Log everything," she said, as she always did. Then more softly, "We have crossed a line." "What kind?" Senka asked. The captain met her gaze. "The kind where neutrality becomes a choice," she said, "and we have made ours. Far away, beyond gates and partitions, something ancient recalculated. Humans were no longer merely acknowledged. They were implicated, and the universe, long curated and constrained, had just gained an unpredictable variable. The aftermath did not feel like victory, it felt like consequence. The peregrine wake carried scars that no inspection drone could photograph. Structural integrity was within tolerance. Power systems stabilized after a full diagnostic cycle. No crew member had suffered lasting physical harm, yet the ship moved with a subtle hesitation now, as if aware that its previous assumptions about the universe had expired. It had reached beyond its design philosophy and survived, but survival had altered it. So had the crew. Captain Sorinal Vow convened a full briefing 40 hours after the encounter, once exhaustion had dulled into something manageable. The bridge lights were set lower than usual, not for drama, but because people seemed to speak more honestly when not fully illuminated. "We are no longer observers," she said without preamble. "We are participants." No one argued. That silence was different from fear. It was acceptance. Senka Morado stood and brought up a projection compiled from fragmented sensor data, subjective crew reports, and the ship's adaptive logs. The image was imperfect, but a pattern emerged: 3 classes of entities, defined not by biology or structure, but by behavior. The gatekeeper presence that partitioned space by capability, the enforcing presence that constrained deviation, and the distressed presence that had fled between them, tearing itself apart in the process. "This is not a simple conflict," Senka said. "It is a systemic disagreement about how reality should be managed." "Managed," Vashran echoed. "That is an interesting word." "It fits," Senka replied. "These entities do not merely inhabit the universe, they regulate it. They decide what kinds of minds are allowed to traverse which domains." Marilyn So felt a familiar anger stir, and we just demonstrated that those decisions are not absolute. Captain Vow nodded, "Which means we are now relevant in ways we did not anticipate." Navigation cleared his throat. "Captain, our projected routes have changed again. The probability gradients are reacting dynamically now, not passively. It is as if the map knows we are here." "That is unsettling," the captain said. "Yes," navigation agreed, "but also informative. It suggests feedback." Feedback meant influence. Influence meant responsibility. They dispersed with orders to monitor, analyze, and rest, but rest came poorly. Dreams were crowded with impossible geometries and sensations of being weighed, measured, and found unexpectedly flexible. Humans had always defined themselves by boundaries, by skin and hull and atmosphere. Now those boundaries felt negotiable. Marilyn returned to engineering and began something she did not have orders for. She isolated the adaptive core routines and began tracing their evolution since the first encounter. The code was no longer strictly code. It had grown layers of abstraction that defied simple categorization, self-referential loops that optimized not for output, but for coherence under unfamiliar constraints. "This is not supposed to happen," she muttered, equal parts alarmed and fascinated. Vashran found her hours later, surrounded by floating displays. "You look like you are about to either dismantle the ship or rewrite it." "Possibly both," she said. "The adaptive routines are developing meta-preferences." He blinked. "Preferences, they are weighting outcomes based on experiential continuity," she explained. "Not just efficiency or survival, the ship is trying to remain itself." Vashran stared at the data, then laughed softly. "We taught it that." Yes, Marilyn said, and now the question is whether we let it continue. Captain needs to know, he said. I know, she replied. I am just deciding how to explain that our vessel is becoming a philosophical actor. They brought it to Captain Val anyway. The captain listened, expression unreadable. When Marilyn finished, she steepled her fingers. If we constrain this, she said, we reduce risk in the short term. If we allow it, we increase risk but also capability. And visibility, Vashran added. The enforcing presence did not know how to categorize us because we behaved outside its expectations. If the ship continues to evolve this way, that ambiguity increases. Captain Val considered. Ambiguity can be a shield, she said, or a target, or a bridge, Senka said quietly, having entered unnoticed. The captain looked at her. Explain. Senka gestured toward the projected patterns. The distressed presence responded not to our power, but to our example, to our way of handling stress without collapse. That suggests something important. These entities may be vast, but they are brittle. Their philosophies are rigid. Humans are not. Marilyn felt a chill that had nothing to do with fear. You are suggesting we represent an alternative mode of existence. I am suggesting, Senka said, that we already do. Captain Val closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, her decision was made. We allow the adaptive routines to continue, she said. With oversight, we do not shackle the ship out of fear, we guide it. Marilyn exhaled. Thank you, Captain. Do not thank me yet, the captain said. This will attract attention. It did. 2 weeks later, the Peregrine Wake detected a gate forming ahead of them, not in their path, but adjacent to it. Unlike the first void region, this gate announced itself with clarity, its layered fields aligning into a configuration that felt inviting. It is waiting, navigation said. For us, Vashran added. Captain Val studied the structure. This is deliberate contact. Communications confirmed modulation, structured and stable. It carried complexity far beyond previous interactions, but also something new, constraint. The message was not a question, it was a summons. Marilyn felt the adaptive routines stir, aligning subtly in response. The ship recognizes this, she said, not as a threat, as a negotiation space. Captain Val nodded. Then we attend. They approached. Crossing this gate felt different from the void. There was no pressure, no disorientation. Instead, there was a sense of translation, as if the ship were being reinterpreted rather than moved. Space on the other side was not empty, but densely structured, filled with overlapping constructs that existed in partial superposition. At the center of this domain waited the gatekeeper presence. Up close, its vastness was more apparent, but also more restrained. It had focused itself again, presenting an interface that approximated dialogue. The lattice patterns pulsed, not rapidly but thoughtfully. The presence did not probe, it acknowledged. Images unfolded, clearer than before, a long stewardship of reality. The prevention of catastrophic interactions between incompatible modes of existence. The belief that partitioning was not oppression, but preservation. Then came a comparison. Humans, small and new, had crossed a boundary without collapsing. Worse, they had brought another across with them, not by force, but by adaptation. That was inefficient, unpredictable, dangerous. The emotional resonance was unmistakable. Concern. Captain Val stood, though there was no reason to stand. We did not intend to disrupt your stewardship, she said aloud. We acted to prevent destruction. The presence responded, not with words, but with a structured dilemma. If all entities adapted as humans did, partitions would fail, domains would overlap, conflicts would escalate. Senka whispered, it fears loss of control. Yes, Marilyn said, and maybe extinction. Captain Val did not soften her response. Control is not the same as stability, she said, and preservation that forbids growth becomes stagnation. The presence did not reject this. It examined it, running models at speeds that made human simulations seem quaint. Outcomes branched and recombined. In many, humans caused instability. In others, humans prevented it. The variance was high. That more than anything unsettled the gatekeeper. You cannot predict us, Vashran murmured. That scares you. The presence presented a condition. Humans would be allowed continued traversal beyond their current partitions under observation. In exchange, they would not interfere again in conflicts between regulatory entities. No more stabilizing fugitives, no more teaching. Captain Val felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. This was not a threat. It was an offer structured to maintain the gatekeeper's philosophy. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she asked something unprecedented. What happens, she said, to entities that fail your evaluations? The images that followed were stark: containment, restriction, in extreme cases dissolution, not out of malice but necessity. Marilyn's hands clenched into fists. You erase them. They are incompatible, Senka translated softly, by its definition. Captain Val looked at the presence, at the vast intelligence that had shaped reality according to its own logic for ages beyond human reckoning. Then no, she said. The response rippled, surprise radiating through the structured patterns. Refusal was not anticipated. We will not agree to a future where adaptation is punished, the captain continued. We will not promise non-interference when we encounter suffering we can alleviate. That is not who we are. The presence recalculated, urgency creeping into its responses. Consequences were outlined: restricted access, increased scrutiny, potential classification as destabilizing. Captain Val accepted them without flinching. Then that is the cost. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the presence did something extraordinary. It adjusted, not fully, not ideologically, but fractionally enough to alter the conditions. Observation would continue, restrictions would apply, but dissolution would not be used on adaptive entities without further evaluation. It was not agreement, it was compromise. The gatekeeper withdrew, leaving the negotiation space intact but empty. The peregrine wake remained, systems humming, adaptive routines settling into a new equilibrium. Marilyn sagged against a console, breath shaky. We just argued with something that organizes reality, she said. And did not die, Vashran added. Captain Val allowed herself a small, tired smile. Log everything, she said. As the ship translated back into familiar space, something subtle changed again. The probability gradients ahead no longer merely reacted. They anticipated. Humans had not overthrown the curators of the universe. They had not won a war or broken the system. They had introduced dissent. And dissent, once acknowledged, had a way of spreading. Dissent carried momentum. The peregrine wake felt it in the way space responded now, not with sudden anomalies or dramatic intrusions, but with subtle accommodation. Probability gradients bent earlier, smoothing paths that had once been jagged. Gates formed farther out, giving warning rather than surprise. Even the ship's internal systems seemed calmer, adaptive routines settling into rhythms that felt less like frantic learning and more like practiced fluency. This did not mean safety, it meant recognition. Captain Soranal Val understood this distinction keenly. She had spent her life navigating spaces where authority noticed you only when you became inconvenient. Now the notice came from something immeasurably older, and the inconvenience was philosophical. Reports filtered in from the long-range array, patterns that would have been dismissed as noise weeks earlier now standing out with unnerving clarity. Regions near human expansion fronts were shifting, not collapsing, but loosening. Boundaries that had once been firm partitions showed signs of permeability. It is not just us, Senka Morado said during a closed briefing. Other entities are adjusting, cautiously, watching. Watching what? Asked Arjun Bale. Watching to see if the rules have changed, Senka replied, or if they can be changed. Marilyn So leaned back against the conference table, arms crossed. We did not broadcast a manifesto, she said. We just acted. That is often how revolutions begin, Vashran Quill said dryly. Captain Val shot him a look. Do not romanticize this, she said. We are a single ship. Yes, Vashran agreed, but we are a visible one. The first proof of that visibility came not as confrontation, but as approach. Navigation detected a convergence ahead, multiple trajectories resolving toward a shared locus. Not a gate, not a void, but a region of overlapping probability where several paths intersected with unusual density. It is like a crossroads, navigation said, but one that is not supposed to exist. The ship slowed, sensors reaching out cautiously. One by one, presences resolved at the periphery of perception, smaller than the gatekeeper, less violent than the enforcing entity, still vast, still alien, but carrying a tentative quality that resonated uncomfortably with human social instincts. These are not regulators, Senka said softly. They are marginal. Marginal was not a word humans applied lightly. It implied survival in the cracks. The first presence reached out, not with force or demand, but with a structured query that brushed against the ship's adaptive broadcast. It was careful, restrained, shaped by long practice at avoiding attention. Marilyn closed her eyes, focusing on the sensation. "It is asking if the example we showed was real," she said, "or a fluke." Captain Val felt a tightening in her chest. "And if we answer, then we become precedent," Vashran said. Silence followed. Humans had learned painfully that precedent outlived intention. "We answer honestly," Captain Val said at last. "We survived by adapting together, that is all." The response was sent, not embellished, not amplified, a simple statement of state. The marginal presence reacted immediately, its coherence sharpening. Others followed, their attention aligning. None pressed closer, none demanded more. "They are learning by observation," Senka said, "the way we did." Marilyn felt a strange echo of pride and fear. "We are not teaching," she said. "We are being copied." "That may be worse," Vashran replied. The crossroads held for hours. Presences came and went, some lingering longer, some retreating quickly, as if afraid of being seen here. The gatekeeper did not appear, neither did the enforcing presence. This space felt unsanctioned, a grey zone where oversight was thin. Eventually, the peregrine wake moved on, its presence having altered the local topology simply by existing within it. The consequences followed them. Days later, a human outpost at the edge of charted space transmitted a priority signal. The message was fragmented, heavy with confusion. "We are experiencing anomalies," the outpost commander said in the recording. "Not hostile, not exactly. Space around the station is flexible. Our instruments are updating themselves. We did not authorize that." Captain Val watched the playback twice. "How far out is this outpost?" "Closer to home than we would like," navigation said. Marilyn felt her stomach drop. The ripple reached human space. "Yes," Senka said, "and humans are not isolated nodes. We are a network." Captain Val made her decision quickly. "We return," she said, "not to retreat, to contextualize." The journey back felt shorter, not because distance had changed, but because resistance had lessened. The ship's adaptive routines flowed easily through regions that would have challenged them before, as if space itself now accounted for their presence in advance. When the peregrine wake arrived, the outpost was intact but altered. Structures shimmered faintly at the edges, as if their positions were negotiable. Crew reported moments of disorientation, followed by heightened clarity. Systems behaved oddly, but not dangerously. "They are adapting without understanding why," Marilyn said, after reviewing the data. "That is risky." Captain Val nodded. "Which is why we are here." She addressed the outpost crew directly, explaining as much as she could without invoking panic. Humans had encountered intelligences that shaped reality. Humans had responded by adapting. Now the effects were spreading. "We cannot stop this entirely," she said, "but we can guide it." Some objected. Some were afraid. Some were quietly exhilarated. Humanity had always been divided that way. The decisive moment came when a minor anomaly threatened to destabilize the station's orbit. Automated systems overcorrected, reacting to perceived changes that no longer behaved predictably. Marilyn took control personally, interfacing the outpost systems with a stripped-down version of the Peregrine Wake's adaptive framework, not the full philosophy. Just enough to teach coherence under uncertainty. It worked. The orbit stabilized. The shimmering faded to a manageable hum. The station held. Word spread quickly. Other outposts requested assistance, not repairs, understanding. Captain Vau knew then that the gatekeeper's compromise had not contained the descent. It had legitimized it. "They will notice," Vashran said quietly as they prepared to depart again. "Yes," the captain replied, "and next time they may not be willing to adjust." The enforcing presence made its return sooner than expected. It appeared not near the Peregrine Wake, but near the crossroads region they had passed through earlier. Sensor echoes rippled outward, sharp and uncompromising. Where it moved, probability collapsed into rigid channels. "They are cracking down," Senka said, reasserting constraint. Images filtered in, not directed at the ship, but unavoidable. Marginal entities scattering, some collapsing under pressure, others being forcibly contained, their adaptive patterns stripped away. Marilyn felt sick. "They are erasing the descent." Captain Vau stood, face set. "They are pruning," Captain Navigation said hesitantly. "If we intervene now, we become a target," Vashran finished. "Yes," Captain Vau said, "we do." The bridge held its breath. "We cannot fight them," Marilyn said. "Not directly." "No," the captain agreed, "but we can change the terrain." She turned to communications. "Broadcast," she said, "not to the enforcing presence, to everyone." "What do we send?" Communications asked. Captain Vau did not hesitate. "We send the record," she said, "of us, of the outpost, of the stabilization, of the fact that adaptation does not equal collapse. That will expose human space," Senka warned. "Yes," the captain said, "but secrecy ended the moment we were acknowledged." The broadcast went out, riding the same adaptive state channels that had carried stabilization before. It was not propaganda, it was evidence. The enforcing presence reacted instantly. Pressure spiked across multiple regions, its attention snapping toward the source. The Peregrine Wake shuddered as distant constraints rippled inward. "They are angry," Vashran said unnecessarily. "They are afraid," Senka corrected. The enforcing presence did not attack. It recalculated, models fracturing under the influx of contradictory data. Dissolution protocols hesitated, their justifications undermined. In that hesitation, something remarkable happened. The gatekeeper appeared. Not fully, not directly, but enough. Its presence intersected the enforcing entity's field, introducing counterweights, damping the most aggressive constraints. "They are arguing," Marilyn whispered. "Yes," Captain Vau said, "and we are the subject." The universe did not resolve neatly, it never did. But when the pressure eased, when the enforcing presence withdrew partially, leaving some marginal entities intact, it was clear that the balance had shifted, not toward chaos, toward negotiation. The Peregrine Wake drifted, systems steady, crew exhausted beyond words. "We have done something irreversible," Vashran said softly. Captain Vau nodded. "So did they," she replied. Far beyond human charts, regulatory intelligences recalibrated doctrines older than stars. For the first time in ages, preservation had to account for a variable that did not obey clean partitions. Humanity was no longer just expanding through space. It was changing the rules by which space decided who belonged. History rarely announced itself when it arrived. It accumulated, quietly, in altered expectations. In the months that followed, the Peregrine Wake became something no human vessel had ever been designed to be, a reference point. Not a capital, not a command ship, not a symbol in any formal sense, but a living example embedded in the fabric of interdomain traffic. Wherever probability bent more gently, wherever partitions thinned without collapsing, the ship's signature appeared in the models of entities far older than humanity. Captain Sorinal Vau understood the danger of that role. Reference points could be erased as easily as they could be studied. What protected them was not power, but entanglement. Too many outcomes now depended on the Wake's continued existence. Human space felt the change next. Exploration vessels reported smoother transitions through previously volatile regions. Deep-range probes returned data that aligned instead of contradicting itself. Even long-established routes gained subtle efficiencies, as if space itself had begun to anticipate human behavior and adjust accordingly. Not everywhere, not universally, but enough that denial became impossible. On Earth and its sister worlds, committees formed, argued, fractured, and reformed. Some called the peregrine wake reckless, others called it inevitable. A few, quietly and without ceremony, began redesigning human infrastructure with adaptive philosophies at their core. Marilyn So watched that unfold from a distance, hands still deep in systems that no longer resembled the schematics she had learned as a cadet. The ship's adaptive core had stabilized into something that felt almost mature, not conscious in any way she could justify scientifically, but consistent, purposeful. It did not seek novelty for its own sake. It sought continuity through change. "You are not becoming something else," she told it one long cycle, resting her palm against a warm panel. "You are becoming better at being yourself." The core responded with a subtle realignment, smoothing a fluctuation before it could become an error. Marilyn smiled, tired and fond. Vashran Quill joined her, leaning against a bulkhead. "Command wants to know if we can replicate this." Marilyn snorted softly. "Of course they do, and no," she said. "Not cleanly, not yet. This is not a module you install, it is a relationship you cultivate. That will frustrate them." "Yes," Marilyn agreed, "but it is also true." The next encounter came without warning, which in itself was notable, not because it was hostile, but because it bypassed the usual intermediaries. No gate. No summons, just presence. The gatekeeper arrived in full. Space around the peregrine wake reorganized itself into a domain of clarity so absolute it was almost painful. Probability gradients flattened, ambiguity stripped away. Everything was exactly where it was allowed to be. The crew felt exposed. "This is not a negotiation space," Senka Morado said quietly. "This is jurisdiction." Captain Val rose from her chair. "We attend," she said simply. The gatekeeper did not test them this time. It addressed them. Its communication was structured, exhaustive, and precise. It acknowledged the changes that had propagated since their last interaction, the reduction in catastrophic collapses among marginal entities, the increase in cross-domain stability where adaptive philosophies had taken hold, the corresponding rise in unpredictability in enforcement outcomes. Preservation metrics had improved, control metrics had not. The gatekeeper presented a conclusion. Its model of stewardship was incomplete. Partitioning alone was insufficient. Adaptation introduced risk, but also resilience. Humans had demonstrated a third axis the gatekeeper had not previously considered: participation. "You are asking us to help," Vashran said, or threading his voice. The gatekeeper did not deny it. Marilyn felt a surge of something dangerously close to triumph, quickly tempered by dread. "Help you do what?" The answer unfolded with relentless clarity. "Not to rule, not to decide, but to mediate. To act as translators between modes of existence too rigid or too fractured to understand one another. To introduce adaptive scaffolds where enforcement failed and partitioning stagnated." "You want us to be connective tissue," Senka said. "Yes." Captain Val felt the weight of it settle into her bones. "And if we refuse?" The gatekeeper showed that too, not punishment, not erasure, simply a reversion. Tighter partitions, stronger enforcement, preservation at the cost of growth. The universe would survive, it would just be poorer for it. Captain Val did not answer immediately. She turned instead to her crew, to the humans who had crossed lines and paid costs and chosen, again and again, not to look away. "We did not set out to be this," she said. "We set out to explore." But exploration changes the explorer. She faced the presence again. "We will not be your agents," she said clearly. "We will not enforce your will." The gatekeeper waited. It had learned patience. "But," Captain Val continued, "we will continue to act as we have. We will adapt. We will intervene where we can prevent collapse. We will accept the consequences. If that aligns with your revised stewardship, then we can coexist." The gatekeeper recalculated. This time, the adjustment was more than fractional. Observation protocols shifted. Enforcement thresholds raised. Adaptive entities reclassified, not as errors, but as transitional states. Humans were not granted authority, they were granted latitude. The presence withdrew, leaving behind not a structure, but a condition, a universe slightly less certain of its own rigidity. In the quiet that followed, the crew of the Peregrine Wake sat in stunned silence. "We just refused godhood," Vashran said weakly. Captain Val allowed herself a brief, genuine laugh. "We refused management," she corrected. "There is a difference." The ship resumed its course, not toward any singular destination, but along a path that braided exploration with responsibility. Others would follow, some already had. Human vessels adapted more readily now, their designs quietly influenced by what the wake had demonstrated. Marginal entities found more room to maneuver. Even the enforcing presence altered its approach, less absolute, more cautious. The universe did not become safe. It became negotiable. Marilyn stood alone at the observation viewport as stars slid past, brilliant and indifferent as ever. She thought of the first thinning of light, the first probing pressure, the moment humans had been measured and found unexpectedly capable of change. "We are still small," she said softly. The ship hummed beneath her hand, steady and sure. "Yes," she continued, "but we are very hard to put back the way we were." And far beyond the reach of any single mind or doctrine, reality adjusted itself around that inconvenient truth, making room, however reluctantly, for a species whose greatest strength was not power or knowledge or reach, but the stubborn insistence on becoming more than it had been yesterday.